Today's World Insight. Chinese President Xi Jinping, the first speaker in setting the 2021 Davos Agenda, to the World Economic Forum, helped get China and the U.S. back on a cooperative track.
We have to re-energize the World Trade Organization, and this can only be done if China and the U.S. also find a common path, and we can break some of the impulses that we have seen so far.
And the way forward for China and the U.S., a departure from the past 4 years, or more of the same. Sharp insights from the president of the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations.
I think a lot that the Biden folks will reverse a lot of the policies which have damaged U.S.-China relations.
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello, I'm Tian Wei, and welcome to World Insight. Chinese President Xi Jinping will speak at the Davos Agenda 2021 on January the 25th. With a yet-to-be-tamed global pandemic, the world is eager to know how the Chinese president plans to lead the world's most populous country in the coming years. President Xi's upcoming speech comes on the 4th anniversary of the Davos 2017 speech calling for multilateralism and collaboration. But it will depend on whether major powers like the U.S. are willing to heed the call of collaboration. Borge Brende, the president of the World Economic Forum, hopes Biden administration in the U.S. will be receptive to solutions contributed by China and others to fix global challenges like the pandemic and climate change. In an exclusive interview, President Brende told me he is most eager to see how big a global role China will take on pressing issues in post-pandemic world. Let's listen in. Borge, what a pleasure to see you.
Likewise, so good to see you, even if it's from a far distance.
We understand that the Agenda Summit of the World Economic Forum is approaching soon, while at the same time we see the change of leadership in some major economies. What do you make of the recent ups and downs of geopolitics, and what does it say with the change of leadership to you?
So firstly, I do hope that 2021 will be a much better year than 2020, also when it comes to global cooperation. And as you refer to, the cooperation between China and the U.S. as G2, the two largest economies in the world, close to 50% of the global GDP, is crucial. So I do hope that in the year to come that President Xi Jinping and also President Joe Biden will find a good way to work together, because we know if we're going to address the three C's, COVID, climate change, and cooperation, we need the world to come together. And COVID anywhere is COVID everywhere, and climate change doesn't know any kind of borders. So we are all in the same boat, and this is also what President Xi Jinping alluded to in Davos in 2017. We do need to work together and also to strengthen the multilateral cooperation.
Talking about the 2017, when Chinese President Xi Jinping was delivering a speech and certainly won a lot of reaction from the international community, he talked about two things. One is multilateral approach, the other is international cooperation. Two keywords you all mentioned in your earlier answer. But the question is how, under the new circumstances, isn't it, Brende? Mr. Brende?
So I think we have no alternative to work together. If we're going to see an early recovery from this crisis, we also have to continue to trade with each other. So we have to re-energize the World Trade Organization. And this can only be done if China and the U.S. also find a common path, and we can break some of the impulses that we have seen so far. Also, I think the multilateral system also has to go through reforms. It was built after the Second World War. A lot has happened. There are a lot of emerging economies. There are new challenges that we are faced with that don't know any kind of borders. So the multilateral system has to be strengthened. It also has to be creative in facing pandemics, but also inclusion, because the growing inequalities that we are seeing in many countries have to be very seriously taken. And then we have the digital divide. 3.6 billion people globally have no access to the internet. How can these kids, for example, be part of this digital transformation if they don't have any access? And here, I think that what President Xi Jinping also signaled in Davos 2017, that China, as the most populous nation of the world, second largest economy in the world, is willing to work with other nations through the multilateral organizations, is something so important.
We understand that the Chinese President Xi Jinping is once again going to deliver a speech at this year's Agenda Summit later next week. Tell us more about what the world would like to know more about China, about what China is thinking, what China's plan is, and how is China looking at the future.
Well, thank you so much. First and foremost, we are, of course, very honored that President Xi Jinping comes to the Davos Agenda meeting next week. He will be the first speaker giving a special message on our opening day. And I think a lot of our business participants and also other governments are really looking for signals on how China is going to show leadership also in the post-COVID world, how China is going to handle a re-entry into the Paris Agreement from the U.S., and also to learn more about also the economic recovery of China. China, in fact, were one of the few economies growing last year, so the rest of the economies have been contracting. So China's leadership now on the sustainable development goals, on climate, but also on the new technologies, also how to address the digital divide, and also how much of a role China will take globally in getting the trade negotiations back also in WTO. I think the world is waiting for, and also to hear really how the president wants to lead China in the years to come.
A lot of questions certainly out there, but also it reminds us of the fact that it was at the World Economic Forum, in fact, Mr. Brende, in 2017, that then Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, and then, of course, who is also now the Chinese President, Xi Jinping, they were both participating at that specific meeting. Many wonder how much a World Economic Forum will play as a platform for different views to be exchanged and also for the real cooperation to be done.
So we strongly believe that the global challenges that we are faced with, being pandemic, being climate change, but also more inclusive growth, digital divide, can only be solved if nations are collaborating. And I do hope that with the new leadership in the U.S., with President Joe Biden, but also with the Chinese leadership, there will be a new path for finding common solutions. Of course, there will always be discussions between two big countries like China and the U.S. There also will be competition, but we will need to see also a willingness to find solutions, and if we are going to make really progress on also fighting global poverty, having a more inclusive world, we need G2 to work together. And our platform at the World Economic Forum is always open. So we will have our physical annual meeting in Singapore in May, and there we hope that the U.S. leadership and the Chinese leadership can come together and start also a dialogue on a good path forward.
Mr. Brende, if you look at the world over the past few years, it's not just about the issues and challenges of leadership, but also some of the major divide we are seeing, as you just mentioned. And we see, even though with the change of leadership in certain countries, those problems have not been solved. So how pragmatic shall we be about what we can achieve over the next, to this year, first of all, and the next few years, Mr. Brende?
No, it's a good question. I think we need to get growth back. China has growth, so then that part is solved for China. But of course, China is also very much relying on growth in other countries because we do trade with each other. So we have done a lot now to create that growth by unparalleled stimulus, $12 trillion in stimulus. But many countries are still in a situation where they're really, really struggling. And they were struggling when it comes to inequalities also before the pandemic. What we are concerned about at the World Economic Forum is that the questions of inequalities, not wealth trickling down also to everyone, that's a challenge that are even bigger with increased unemployment in many countries, and the legitimacy of the market economy, the legitimacy of our systems are based on a contract that everyone have to gain from it. If you work hard, if you contribute to society, you should also have a decent salary. These are things that I think we need to address, making sure that inequalities are not growing, that they are closing, and that all the young people of the world do have more equal opportunities to succeed.
Mr. Brende, we know World Economic Forum is a platform that brings in a lot of stakeholders, including from the business community. Now, business community have to save themselves over the past few years, particularly during the year of the pandemic. But now, with the momentum of politics changing in the world, what do you think are the qualities of political leadership they need to demonstrate in this year and hopefully in the next few years?
So business leaders, I think, have been very responsible in this crisis. And
Yes.
We have, for example, last year, launched the ESGs, these environmental, social governance standards that companies have committed to. So in many ways, companies have gone further than governments now, saying that they want to go climate neutral in 2030 or 2050. And as you know, the World Economic Forum is the international organization for public-private cooperation. And I think with all the stimulus that is out there, the fiscal muscles of many governments is limited in the years to come. So we also have to mobilize the private sector to support the digital transformation and the Green Deal. So we do hope that the 1,000 companies leading of the world that are part of the World Economic Forum will also see that they have a huge responsibility in transforming the world and the growth into something more sustainable, job creating, and also working for less inequality.
On the other hand, you also see in the trade sector, there seems to be a lot of consensus. For example, RCEP, China, ASEAN countries plus Japan, South Korea at the late last year. Meanwhile, China-EU investment initiative seems to also on its way there, after China's agreed the latest on the labor standards. So, Mr. Brende, looking at the future, the trade, do we have enough momentum from your perspective?
So, trade is the engine of growth. That has been the engine for the last 2 decades, and or 3 decades. What we have a tendency of forgetting is that in those 3 decades, we have seen poverty eradication that we haven't seen any time before in our history. So I'm glad that trade is now back on the agenda. I am very happy about the trade agreements between the Asian countries, but also between China and the EU. But if we're going to get back growth, we also need to get back trade and countries trading with each other. You know, this beggar thy neighbor attitude should stop. It is really about prosper your neighbor. So if others do well, you will do well. And if you do well, others will do well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brende, for talking to us on CGTN.
No, thank you so much for inviting me, and I hope to see you in person very soon.
My earlier conversation with Borge Brende, President of the World Economic Forum.